Today, we're talking about something absolutely tiny that holds a massive amount of power: the semiconductor chip. You see, when a global shortage of these things brought entire industries grinding to a halt, the European Union rolled out this huge plan to basically reboot its role in the global tech race. So we're going to break down exactly what the EU Chips Act is and, what it really means for a digital future. So, here's how we're going to walk through it. First, we'll look at the big wake-up call that really kicked this whole thing off. Then, we'll dive into the grand plan itself, the CHIPS Act, and we'll unpack its three main pillars: how to innovate, how to actually build the stuff, and how to create a safety net for the future. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at what this all means for the future of tech in Europe. Okay, let's dive right in. All right, first up, Europe's chip wake-up call. Because before you can really get the solution, you have to understand the sheer scale of the problem the EU was staring down. I mean, you probably noticed this yourself, right? The answer really does lie with that tiny little component. These recent global shortages, they hit everything, from the car industry all the way down to you just trying to get a new gaming console. And it all came down to a lack of semiconductors. So what exactly is a semiconductor? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like the brain inside literally every modern electronic device. We're talking about your car's safety systems, your phone, but also critical stuff like healthcare equipment and the energy grid. These chips are the absolute essential building blocks of our digital world. And that's where the problem really slammed home for the EU. These, quote, unprecedented disruptions in the supply chain, they basically threw a giant spotlight on a massive vulnerability. Europe was depending way too much on other countries for both designing and making these chips. And this wasn't just, an inconvenience. It was a serious economic and security risk that they just couldn't ignore anymore. Which brings us right to our second section, the EU's grand plan. So faced with this critical dependency, the European Union decided it needed a really big long-term strategy. And that strategy is the EU Chips Act. And look, this isn't just about fixing one little part of the problem. The act is a complete framework, and it's designed to boost the entire European semiconductor ecosystem. We're talking about the whole shebang, from the earliest stages of research and design, all the way to building massive new factories, and even creating a system to handle future crises. The big goal here is to make Europe more competitive, more innovative, and a whole lot more resilient. So let's break this plan down, starting with the first pillar: innovate and design. This is all about sparking creativity and building a really strong foundation for the future. It's called the CHIPS for Europe initiative. And you can tell just how serious they are by looking at the investment. The EU is kicking this whole thing off with 3.3 times billion euros in public funding. That is a serious commitment. And it's really intended to bridge the gap between Europe's amazing research and its ability to turn those brilliant ideas into actual products. And that money isn't just going into one big pot. It's being spread across the entire innovation pipeline. So it's funding a virtual design platform to help different companies and researchers work together. It's creating these advanced pilot lines where new chip designs can be tested out. There's also a big focus on next-gen stuff like quantum chips, a whole network of centers to build up skills, and even a special fund to help smaller businesses get the cash they need to innovate and grow. Which, of course, leads us right to the second pillar: build the factories. Because look, innovation is fantastic, but the EU realized it also needs the physical capacity to produce these chips at scale, right there in Europe. The act basically encourages two main types of factories. On one side, you've got integrated production facilities. So think of a big company that designs its own chips and then builds them in its own factory to use in its own products. But on the other side, you've got open EU foundries. These are basically factories for hire. They offer up their production lines to any company that needs chips made, which is absolutely crucial for smaller companies that can't just build their own multi-billion-euro plant. But here's the catch, and it's a really important one. The EU isn't just throwing money at any old factory. To get support, these places have to be first of a kind in the Union. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, according to the Act, a first-of-a-kind facility is one that brings a level of innovation that isn't really available in the EU yet. This could be a totally new manufacturing process, a huge leap forward in computing power or energy efficiency, or maybe building more secure chips. The point is, it's about attracting genuinely new cutting-edge technology to Europe, not just building more of the same old thing. So we have a plan to innovate and a plan to build. Now let's get to the third and final pillar: the safety net. This is all about making sure Europe is never, ever caught by surprise by a chip shortage again. And the approach here is really proactive. The EU will constantly be monitoring the global supply chain, looking for any early warning signs of trouble. If a serious risk pops up, an alert gets triggered. And if a major shortage actually starts to hit critical sectors like healthcare or energy, the Commission can officially declare a crisis stage, which then unlocks a whole toolbox of emergency measures. And this is where the plan really shows its teeth. In a full-on crisis, the EU can issue what are called priority-rated orders. This is an incredibly powerful tool. It basically allows the Commission to force certain chip factories, like those new ones we just talked about, to prioritize making chips for critical sectors. And as the text says, this can override any other contract, public or private. It's a definite last resort, but a powerful one for sure. So, with all these pieces in place, we get to our final section, the future of European tech. I mean, what is the ultimate goal here? What does success actually look like for this massive undertaking? It really all boils down to these three core goals. First, to innovate, by rebuilding Europe's strength in chip design. Second, to build, by bringing the most advanced manufacturing back to the continent. And third, to secure, by creating a solid system to predict and handle future supply chain shocks. Success here means a Europe that is less dependent on others, more in control of its own tech destiny, and a much, much stronger player in the global digital economy. Look, the EU Chips Act is, without a doubt, one of the most ambitious industrial policies the Union has ever launched. It's a direct answer to a global wake-up call, and it's a very clear statement of intent. And all of this leaves us with one final crucial question. As all the nations around the world are fighting for technological dominance, will this grand plan actually be enough to launch Europe to the front of the pack? Well, only time will tell.